Hi, I'm Gareth. I promised in a previous video that I'd return to the subject of cost and the costs savings that we've made since we installed solar and battery. So why this is an issue now is that the days are shorter. There's not a lot of solar power because it's very overcast and grey. And so the contribution that we're getting really from the solar panels has more or less disappeared. Our power consumption is also slightly higher because we've got more lights on, we're inside more, and we're just using more electricity. So I wanted to come back and look at what has happened to our costs, but this has been significantly influenced recently because of two new schemes that have been introduced to try to manage grid demand. So first off, let's get to the punchline. Our prices have stayed super low. So even though we're moving into late autumn and now early winter, the amount that we're paying for our electricity is still more or less what it was before energy prices went all of the way up and before we had an electric car. So that's really interesting. It's kind of hovering around the £50–60 a month mark. So this all comes down to balancing supply and demand. What does that mean? Well, our houses and our factories and our industry produces demand on the electricity grid, and that demand is met by nuclear power, which you can't really turn on or off. It's just kind of there, and also renewable energy, so solar power, wind power, those kinds of things, together with some gas generation. Now, when the amount of energy that is being produced exceeds the amount that's being demanded, we've got a problem, we've got a surplus. We can store some of that electricity in things like pump storage, but there's not a lot of that available in the UK at the moment. And as I said, you can't turn off nuclear power stations. You also can't, if the wind is blowing or the sun is shining, you've got power there, which is surplus. So the first scheme that's been introduced is something called the Octopus Power-up scheme. It's a pilot project that's currently running in parts of eastern England. And at 24 hours notice, you get an email basically saying, tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow morning, between these times, your electricity is going to be free. So that's absolutely free, and you're encouraged to use as much as possible because there's this surplus that's going to be problematic if it's not kind of mopped up in demand. So this first scheme basically gives you this free electricity. Now, that sounds great, and the amount of money that you get credited back from using it is quite a lot of money. But that's only because at the time that you're using it, normally electricity is pretty expensive. So you're using this expensive electricity and then you're getting quite a big credit back. That doesn't really represent the amount that you're saving because we wouldn't have used electricity from the grid at that point. We would have probably been just running from the battery. So instead, when we're thinking about the amount of money that we're saving, we really need to think, how much is that electricity would that have cost if we'd bought it cheap overnight? That's the amount that we're actually saving. So this is scenario one. So supply is exceeding demand because of excess renewables. But scenario two is when that situation is the other way around. So the amount of energy that is being produced is less than the amount that's being demanded. So this is your early evening, generally your early evening peak time, sort of 5 o'clock to half 6, half 4 to 6 o'clock. That's a late afternoon, early evening. Everybody gets home, cookers goes on, washing machines go on, those kinds of things, and demand absolutely shoots up. So we can't meet that demand from the existing supply of nuclear power and some gas and some renewables. So what we have to do in those situations is turn on dirty, expensive fossil fuels. So coal-fired power stations, more gas. That's obviously really bad. It's expensive and it's very dirty. So the second scheme, which has been introduced nationally by the National Grid, is the Demand Flexibility Service. So this is a really crap name for basically saying the National Grid will incentivise households to use less electricity in that period. And they pay an awful lot of money. So the scheme that ran yesterday, you were paid £4 for every unit less than the average over the previous 10 days that you consumed. Now that's great. That stops people using some stuff, and I think for most people you could probably hunker down and save maybe half a unit over that time. However, we're not normally consuming any electricity at that time because of the battery. But the scheme still allows you to get credit for any amount that you used less. So what does using less than zero mean? Using less than zero means that you empty your battery onto the grid. So you take the stored energy that you have and you give it back to the grid over that hour and a half period. And if you've got a big enough battery to export constantly through that whole period, and you've got a powerful enough inverter, you can actually push out quite a lot of electricity onto the grid in that period. So our inverter will supply 5 kilowatts of power. In the house, when the house is normally running, we're consuming between half a kilowatt and 0.5, 0.6 kilowatts. So what that means is that over that period we can export, let's say, 4.5 kilowatts over an hour and a half period. So that's around a total of 6 kilowatt hours, 6 units. So if you're being paid £4 for exporting those 6 units, that's about £24-25 of credit that you get back. 24 or 25 pounds earned in an hour and a half period. That's quite a lot of money. At the moment, that's somewhere between a third and a half of all of our electricity bill in the month. And that second scheme has actually made a bigger financial contribution than even getting electricity for free. So what's that done? So if we return to the chart that I showed in the first video that I produced, you might remember that the yellow columns on the right hand side of this chart represent the amount of saving that we've got from having introduced solar and then battery at home. So it's a very significant amount of money that we're already saving just by having this infrastructure in place. And I suppose the concern was that as our domestic consumption went up into the winter and as the supply of solar energy went down, then that yellow bar would shrink. And it has done. It's absolutely, we're getting less saving just from having that battery and those solar panels in place. However, the introduction of these two new schemes has absolutely mitigated that to the extent that our November bill was the lowest bill that we've had since this whole thing started. So if I extend this out to show the last 2 months since I produced the last video, so that's October and November, which are now 4 months, you can see on this graph that in the bottom right we've got these small dark blue sections. That's the amount of saving that we're making because of the Octopus Power-up scheme. So that's where we're getting this electricity for free instead of buying it overnight for 7.5p because there's been too much electricity supplied because of excess renewables. The purple section that has just appeared on the very right hand column is the result of the demand flexibility scheme. So this is this bit where the grid, the national grid, will credit you for any electricity that you're using less than average, or in our case they're crediting us for all of the electricity that we're dumping out to the grid from our battery through our inverter. And that's electricity that we're generally buying for 7.5p and we're selling at £4 per unit. So you can see that there's a saving there just in November, just in that one event, of around £25. We're already into December, 2 days, 3 days into December. There's already been another one of those schemes. Didn't quite earn as much in that scheme because, like an idiot, I got the times wrong. Of when I'd set up our inverter to do that. But still, nevertheless, we earned about £16 and £17 over that scheme. So that would only take 2 more of those demand flexibility events to happen in December, and all of our electricity will be free. Now this is only possible because in this case because we've got a home battery, because we can buy the electricity overnight for cheap and we can export it at this eye-wateringly high rate during this demand flexibility service. And the last chart I wanted to show you is to show what this has done to the average unit price per month that we've been paying. So the top red line shows what the price cap rate is for electricity. This has come down in recent months. There's been an announcement to say that it's going to be going back up slightly in January, but it has drifted gently downwards as we've been able to secure sort of better energy supplies, and prices have stabilised a little bit. But nevertheless, you'll see that the lower line, which is showing what we are paying per kilowatt hour in each one of those months, has continued to come down. So in November, it was as low as 4 pence per kilowatt hour. Now their sort of national average price cap amount is about 27 pence. So you can see there's a factor of like 6.5, 7 between what we're paying and what the price cap amount is. And as I said, we earned £25 in 90 minutes just for that one event in November. I only need another 2 more in December, and then all of our electricity is free. So I hadn't foreseen this, wasn't really aware, obviously, that either of these Power-up or the demand flexibility service schemes were going to be running. The electricity would have still been much, much cheaper as a consequence of having solar on the battery. But the influence of these two schemes more than countered the lack of solar energy available to us at this time of the year. I think what I've learned from that is, you've got to be in it to win it, really. You've got to have this infrastructure in place to be able to take advantage of these schemes. And then once you've got the infrastructure in place, the more it's there, the more that these schemes are going to pop up, and you're going to be able to do things to sort of take advantage of them, I suppose. You've got to be in it to win it. Now, I haven't talked about how much this has been automated. I have automated part of this. I've automated the Octopus Power-up schemes, which is this this bit where we're just kind of taking advantage of free electricity. And overnight, on the night before, I do things like don't charge the home battery because I know I'm going to be able to charge it automatically the following day while it's free. If possible, I can get if the car is at home, the car gets plugged in, that gets charged. We turn on the immersion heater. If we know it's coming, we can run the tumble dryer in that period. All of those kinds of things. And all of that has been automated. So if you take a look at my GitHub page, link is there, QR code will take you to the same page. You'll see the code that I've used. I can't automate the demand flexibility scheme stuff at the moment. It's because my solar inverter it doesn't currently support this stuff being automated programmatically, which is frustrating. But to their credit, Foxus, who's the manufacturer of our inverter and our battery, have been shipping firmware at a really quite impressive rate recently, and they enabled the capability to do this export for me on the morning that the first scheme ran, which is pretty cool. So what I'm really hoping is that they go on and extend the capability of the router, that they extend the capability of the inverter and the battery management system so that I can programmatically automate that as well. If that happens, I will update my Home Assistant code and you'll be able to find it on that page. But for now, that's all I wanted to say in today's video. I've been Gareth, and I will look forward to seeing you next time.